The Galactic Combat League had seen many fighters come and go, but none quite like Sarah Chen. Standing barely 5 feet tall with her regulation-cut brown hair and perpetually calm expression, she looked more like a librarian than a warrior. The alien commentators often joked about her appearance during broadcasts, calling her the human pet or Earth's diplomatic mistake. Sarah had been fighting in the League for 3 standard years now, and her record was adequate. 47 wins, 43 losses, and 12 draws. Nothing spectacular, nothing that would make the history books. She fought with textbook precision, following every rule to the letter, never showing aggression beyond what was necessary to win. The crowds found her boring. Her own species found her embarrassing. "Another technical victory for the human," announced Zexhai, the 4-armed Krillian commentator, as Sarah methodically dismantled a Thurian heavy fighter twice her size. "She continues her pattern of minimum-effort combat. Truly, humans must be the most passive species in the galaxy." Sarah stepped out of the combat ring, her breathing barely elevated. The Thurian fighter required medical attention for his broken arm and ribs, but Sarah had inflicted the damage with such clinical precision that it looked almost accidental. She never gloated, never celebrated, never even smiled after her victories. In the locker room, her coach Marcus Rodriguez shook his head. "You know you could have finished that fight in the first round, right? That Thurian telegraphed every move like he was directing traffic." "The objective was to win within regulation parameters," Sarah replied, toweling off her face. "Mission accomplished." Marcus had been coaching fighters for 20 years, and Sarah frustrated him more than any athlete he'd ever worked with. She had reflexes that bordered on supernatural, tactical awareness that put military strategists to shame, and physical conditioning that defied human norms. Yet she fought like she was afraid to hurt anyone. "The sponsors are getting antsy," Marcus said. "Boring fights don't sell tickets. The league brass is talking about your contract renewal." Sarah nodded without emotion. Understood. What Marcus didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Sarah Chen wasn't just any human. She was former Earth Defense Force, Special Operations Division, the kind of soldier whose existence was classified at levels most governments didn't acknowledge. The kind of soldier trained to end conflicts before they began, to neutralize threats with minimal collateral damage, and to never, ever let emotions cloud tactical judgment. She had volunteered for the Galactic Combat League as part of humanity's cultural exchange program, but her real mission was intelligence gathering. Every species she fought, she learned their weaknesses, their combat patterns, their physical limitations. Earth Command wanted data on potential alien adversaries, and Sarah was providing it while maintaining perfect cover as an unremarkable human athlete. The problem was, maintaining that cover meant fighting like a normal human, and normal humans, as the galaxy had learned, were considered barely above prey animals in terms of combat effectiveness. The galaxy's dominant species had evolved on high-gravity worlds, or had natural weapons, or possessed multiple limbs. Humans were soft, slow, and fragile by galactic standards. Sarah's real training had prepared her to fight opponents who could bench press a hovercar or move faster than most beings could track. But she couldn't demonstrate those capabilities without blowing her cover and potentially revealing Earth's true defensive capabilities to species that might one day become enemies. So she fought boring fights, technical wins, minimum necessary force. After her shower, Sarah made her way to the communications center to file her standard post-fight report. The facility was nearly empty at this hour, with only maintenance drones humming through the corridors. She activated the quantum-encrypted channel and began her transmission to Earth Command. Subject designation: various species combatants. Data collected on Thurian physiological response to targeted pressure point strikes. Bone density approximately 60% above human baseline, but joint articulation remains vulnerable to leverage-based attacks. Recommend training modifications for future encounters. As she spoke, Sarah was unaware that she was being watched. In the facility's main security office, Kethmore, the station's reptilian security chief, was reviewing the day's footage for his weekly report. Most days, this was routine work, checking for contraband, monitoring for violent incidents, ensuring the facility's alien population wasn't planning anything problematic. But today something caught his attention. The timestamp showed the exact moment of Sarah's fight, but the camera angle was wrong. Instead of the usual ringside view, this was from a maintenance access shaft that provided a direct overhead shot of the combat area. From this angle, Kethmore could see something that no one in the arena had noticed. Sarah's movements weren't just precise. They were superhuman. The recording showed her dodging attacks that she couldn't possibly have seen coming, positioning herself for strikes with mathematical perfection, and calculating angles of attack that would have challenged a combat AI. More troubling was what happened in the final seconds of the fight. When the Thurian had attempted his finishing move, a devastating overhead slam that could have killed a normal human, Sarah had moved to counter it almost before the attack began. The motion was so fast that normal viewing speed made it look like she had simply stepped aside, but slowed down to quarter speed, it was clear that Sarah had moved with inhuman reaction time. Kethmore replayed the sequence 12 times, each viewing revealing more impossible details. Sarah wasn't just a good fighter pretending to be mediocre. She was something else entirely. Something that could have ended every fight she'd ever been in within seconds if she had chosen to do so. The security chief's training kicked in. In his species' military doctrine, there was only one reason for a superior combatant to deliberately appear weak: reconnaissance. Sarah Chen wasn't here to fight. She was here to spy. Kethmore quickly copied the footage to a secure drive and began composing a message to his contacts in galactic intelligence. If the humans were conducting covert military research using their Combat League participants, it could mean that Earth was preparing for war. And if Earth was preparing for war while pretending to be a peaceful species seeking cultural exchange, then everything the galaxy thought it knew about humanity was wrong. As Sarah finished her report and prepared to leave the communications center, she felt the familiar tingle of her combat awareness protocols. Someone was watching her. Her peripheral vision caught the faint reflection of a surveillance lens tracking her movement. And her enhanced hearing detected the subtle electronic signature of recording equipment operating outside normal parameters. She maintained her casual demeanor while internally shifting to high alert. Her cover might be compromised, but there was no way to know for certain without revealing abilities that would only make things worse. For now, she would continue the mission and hope that whatever had been detected could be explained away. But as she walked back toward her quarters, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that her 3 years of careful performance had just come to an end. Someone had seen something they shouldn't have, and in the morning, everything would change. In his office, Kethmore was already composing his report. Urgent. Human combatant displaying capabilities far exceeding species baseline. Recommend immediate investigation. Possible military intelligence operation in progress. The message would reach Galactic Command within hours, and by morning, Sarah Chen's quiet little war would become something much larger and far more dangerous than anyone in the galaxy was prepared for. Sarah woke to the sound of her door chiming at Oro 400 station time, 2 hours before her usual training session. Through her enhanced vision, she could see the heat signatures of at least 6 beings in the corridor outside her quarters. Military formation, armed, professional. She had perhaps 30 seconds before they would override her door locks. Moving with the fluid efficiency that had kept her alive through 17 classified operations, Sarah activated her personal emergency beacon and began destroying evidence. Her civilian identity had been maintained through careful preparation, but there were still items in her possession that no normal Combat League fighter should have. The quantum communicator went into the matter dissolution unit first, followed by her real identification documents and the detailed tactical assessments she'd been compiling on every species she'd encountered. The process took 18 seconds. The door burst open just as Sarah settled back into her bed, projecting the confused and frightened demeanor of a human athlete awakened by an unexpected raid. "Sarah Chen," announced the lead figure, a massive corvan whose species resembled an upright rhinoceros with military cybernetics. "By order of Galactic Command, you are under arrest for suspected espionage activities." "I don't understand," Sarah said, letting her voice shake appropriately. "What espionage? I'm just a fighter." The corvan's partner, a slender Zenthari with the characteristic blue-silver skin of their species, stepped forward with a recording device. "We have evidence suggesting that your combat performance has been deliberately diminished to conceal your true capabilities. This constitutes a violation of League regulations and potentially indicates military intelligence gathering." Sarah's mind raced through the possibilities. Someone had obtained footage that revealed her real abilities, but the question was how much they actually knew versus how much they suspected. Her response would determine whether this remained a sports league disciplinary issue or escalated into a galactic incident. "I've always fought within the rules," she said. "If you think I'm not trying hard enough, I can train more intensively." The Zenthari activated her recording device and displayed a holographic projection in the center of Sarah's quarters. The footage showed her fight against the Thurian from the previous day, but from an angle Sarah had never seen before. An overhead maintenance camera had captured everything. At normal speed, the fight looked routine, but as the Zenthari slowed the playback, Sarah's impossible reaction times became undeniable. The recording showed her beginning to dodge attacks before her opponent had even committed to making them, demonstrated reflexes that should have been physically impossible for her species, and revealed tactical awareness that belonged in military operations rather than sporting events. "According to our xenobiology experts," the corvan said, "these movements require neural processing speeds approximately 400% faster than baseline human capability. Either you represent an evolutionary leap for your entire species, or you have received augmentation that was not declared to League medical staff." Sarah maintained her confused expression while rapidly calculating her options. The footage was damaging, but not necessarily fatal to her cover story. There were several plausible explanations she could offer, from genetic anomalies to undisclosed training techniques. The key was keeping the investigation focused on League violations rather than military espionage. "I've always been quick," she said. "My coaches called it natural talent." The Zenthari's expression indicated skepticism. "Natural talent does not explain tactical awareness that rivals military AI systems. You positioned yourself for counterattacks against techniques that your opponent had not yet attempted. This suggests prior knowledge of Thurian combat doctrine that extends far beyond athletic preparation." This was more problematic. Sarah's training had indeed included extensive study of alien military tactics, and her unconscious application of that knowledge during fights was apparently more obvious than she had realized. "I study my opponents carefully," she said. "I watch recordings of their previous fights, analyze their patterns." "We reviewed your access to League databases," the corvan interrupted. "You have never requested opponent analysis materials beyond basic biographical information. Yet your combat responses demonstrate detailed knowledge of species-specific vulnerabilities that are classified at military levels." Sarah realized her situation was deteriorating rapidly. These beings weren't just investigating a rule violation. They had clearly been preparing this case for some time, and had gathered evidence that would be difficult to explain away without revealing her true background. Before she could respond, her personal communicator activated with an emergency priority signal. The device wasn't supposed to function while she was in custody, which meant someone with significant authority was overriding normal protocols. "Fighter Chen, said a familiar voice that made Sarah's blood freeze. "This is Admiral Vextar of Galactic Command. You will accompany our security team to Headquarters Station for formal questioning. Do not attempt to resist or flee." Admiral Vextar was the highest-ranking military officer in the Galactic Alliance, a Kodaran whose species had never lost a war and whose personal reputation for strategic brilliance was matched only by his ruthlessness toward enemies of galactic peace. If Vextar was personally involved in this investigation, it meant they suspected far more than athletic violations. "Admiral," Sarah said carefully, "I'm honored by your attention, but I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'm just a human athlete trying to represent my species well in the Combat League." The communicator crackled with what might have been laughter. "Ms. Chen, our intelligence services have been monitoring Earth's activities since your species joined the galactic community. We are aware that your government operates military programs that have not been disclosed to the Alliance. We are also aware that several of your fellow athletes in various galactic competitions possess capabilities that suggest extensive combat training." This was exactly what Sarah had been trying to prevent. If Galactic Command suspected that Earth was running intelligence operations under the cover of cultural exchange programs, it could lead to anything from sanctions to open conflict. Her mission had been to gather information while maintaining the illusion that humanity was a harmless, relatively primitive species seeking peaceful integration into galactic society. "Admiral, I can assure you that Earth's participation in galactic athletics is purely civilian." "Ms. Chen," Vextar interrupted, "we have identified at least 12 humans currently participating in various League activities whose performance profiles suggest military training equivalent to our Special Forces units. This represents a pattern that cannot be explained by coincidence or natural talent." Sarah felt her stomach drop. If they had identified 12 operatives, they had probably identified all of them. Earth's entire covert intelligence network in galactic space was compromised. "Furthermore," Vextar continued, "analysis of your planet's technological development suggests capabilities that your government has not declared to the Alliance. Your species claims to possess only basic space travel and planetary defense systems. Yet several of our allies have reported detecting energy signatures from your system that indicate far more advanced military applications." The Admiral was revealing information that suggested Galactic Command had been conducting their own intelligence operations against Earth. This wasn't just about Sarah's blown cover. It was about a much larger game of galactic politics that was suddenly becoming very dangerous. "You have a choice, Ms. Chen," Vextar said. "You can continue to maintain your civilian cover story, in which case you will be prosecuted for fraud and espionage under galactic law. Or you can acknowledge your true status and participate in negotiations between your government and ours to resolve this situation diplomatically." Sarah knew that her response in the next few seconds would determine not just her own fate, but potentially the future relationship between humanity and the rest of the galaxy. Earth had sent her to gather intelligence because they feared that the galaxy's more powerful species might eventually decide that humans were a threat worth eliminating. Now it appeared that those fears had been well-founded. "What kind of negotiations?" she asked. "The kind where your species explains exactly what you've been hiding," Vextar replied, "and we decide whether humanity represents a manageable ally or an unacceptable threat." The line went dead, leaving Sarah alone with her captors, and the growing realization that her quiet little intelligence mission had just become the opening move in a conflict that could reshape the entire galaxy. The trip to Galactic Command headquarters took 18 hours aboard a military transport that could have made the journey in 6. Sarah spent the time in a detention cell designed for beings much larger than humans, giving her ample space to think and very little else to do. Her guards were professional but nervous, checking on her every 30 minutes as if they expected her to somehow escape from a ship traveling faster than light. What they didn't know was that Sarah had already escaped. Not physically, but informationally. The emergency beacon she had activated before her arrest was more than a distress signal. It was a quantum-encrypted data burst that had transmitted her complete mission files, the tactical assessments she had gathered on 12 different alien species, and a detailed report on the security breach that had led to her capture. By now, Earth Command knew that their covert intelligence network had been compromised. More importantly, they knew that the Galactic Alliance was far more aware of human capabilities than they had previously believed. The strategic balance that Earth had been carefully maintaining for 3 years was about to shift dramatically. When the transport docked at Headquarters Station, Sarah found herself escorted through corridors that showcased the Alliance's military might. The station itself was a massive structure that could house 1 million beings and possessed enough firepower to reduce a planet to rubble. The message was clear. Whatever humanity thought it could accomplish through secrecy and misdirection, the Alliance had the power to end it through force if necessary. Admiral Vexitar was waiting in a conference room that could have held Sarah's entire hometown. The Kadaran stood nearly 9 feet tall, with the characteristic armored skin and predatory features of his species. Behind him were representatives from 6 other major Alliance races, each positioned to emphasize their physical and technological superiority over the single human in the room. "Ms. Chen," Vexitar said without preamble, "your government has had 6 hours to respond to our communications. They have acknowledged your true status and agreed to participate in these discussions. You are now representing Earth in negotiations that will determine your species' future relationship with the galactic community." Sarah had been trained for diplomatic scenarios, but never at this level. She was being asked to speak for her entire planet in a conversation that could lead to anything from trade agreements to interstellar war. "I'm honored by the Admiral's confidence," she said. "But I should point out that I'm not qualified to negotiate on behalf of my government. I'm a field operative, not a diplomat." "Nevertheless," said Counselor Yith-Ara, the Alliance's chief diplomatic representative, "you are the human we have available, and time is a factor. Our intelligence indicates that your species has been developing military capabilities while publicly maintaining a peaceful stance. This pattern of behavior is considered highly suspicious by Alliance security protocols." Sarah realized they were offering her a choice between immediate negotiations and what would probably be immediate conflict. Earth wasn't ready for open warfare with the Alliance, which meant she needed to find a way to de-escalate the situation while buying time for her government to prepare proper diplomatic responses. "What specific capabilities are you concerned about?" she asked. Admiral Vexitar activated a holographic display that filled the center of the room. The projection showed Earth's solar system, but with far more detail than any civilian database would contain. Orbital installations were highlighted in red, energy signatures were marked with tactical assessments, and movement patterns of human spacecraft were tracked with military precision. "Your species claims to possess only basic defensive systems," Vexitar said. "Yet our long-range scans detect weapons platforms capable of engaging targets at interplanetary distances. Your government states that human space travel is limited to your immediate solar system, yet we have tracked human vessels operating in 12 different star systems." The projection zoomed in on specific installations that Sarah recognized as Earth's most classified military facilities. The Alliance had been conducting surveillance operations that were far more comprehensive than anyone on Earth had suspected. "Furthermore," Counselor Yith-Ara added, "your covert intelligence network has been gathering tactical information on Alliance member species for over 3 years. This suggests preparation for military action against civilizations that your government claims to consider friendly allies." Sarah understood now why her superiors had considered this mission so important. Earth had been trying to assess whether the Alliance represented a potential threat, but from the Alliance perspective, humanity's secretive behavior made them look like the threat. Both sides had been preparing for a conflict that neither side actually wanted. The intelligence gathering wasn't preparation for aggression, Sarah said. It was preparation for defense. My government was concerned that some Alliance species might eventually view humanity as a threat worth eliminating. We were trying to understand what we would be facing if that happened. Yet your species chose secrecy over transparency, Admiral Vexitar replied. If your concerns were legitimate, why not raise them through diplomatic channels? The question struck at the heart of humanity's dilemma. Earth's leaders had been afraid that openly expressing concern about Alliance intentions would be interpreted as hostility, so they had chosen covert assessment instead. But from the Alliance perspective, that secrecy looked exactly like the kind of behavior that hostile species exhibited. Because, Sarah said slowly, we were afraid that asking questions about your military capabilities would make you think we were planning to fight you. The silence that followed lasted nearly a full minute. Finally, Counselor Yathara's expression shifted to something that might have been amusement. So your species has been conducting military intelligence operations because you were afraid we might attack you, while we have been conducting surveillance on your species because we were afraid you might attack us. Yes, Sarah said. I believe that accurately summarizes the situation. Admiral Vexitar deactivated the holographic display and settled back in his chair. This presents an interesting problem. Both of our civilizations have been operating under the assumption that the other represents a potential threat. Both have been gathering intelligence to assess that threat. And both have been interpreting the other's intelligence gathering as evidence that the threat is real. Sarah nodded. It's a classic security spiral. Each side's defensive preparations look like offensive preparations to the other side, which justifies increased defensive preparations, which look even more threatening. The question, said Counselor Yathara, is how we break that spiral before it leads to an actual conflict that nobody wants. For the first time since her arrest, Sarah felt hopeful. The Alliance leadership wasn't looking for an excuse to attack humanity. They were looking for a way to avoid a war that they saw as both unnecessary and potentially devastating. I have a suggestion, Sarah said. Instead of continuing to spy on each other, why don't we just share information directly? If both sides are concerned about the other's capabilities and intentions, transparency would address both sets of concerns simultaneously. Admiral Vexitar considered this. You propose that Earth provide detailed information about its actual military capabilities, while the Alliance provides similar information about our defensive preparations? Mutual transparency, Sarah confirmed. Both sides get the intelligence they were seeking through covert operations, but through open cooperation instead of espionage. There would need to be verification protocols, Counselor Yathara said. Both sides would need to allow inspection teams to confirm that the information being shared is accurate and complete. Sarah realized they were discussing the framework for a completely new kind of relationship between humanity and the Alliance. Instead of the careful diplomatic dance that had characterized their interactions for 3 years, both sides would acknowledge their mutual suspicions and address them through unprecedented cooperation. My government would need to approve such an arrangement, Sarah said. But I believe they would be interested. The current situation isn't sustainable for either side. Admiral Vexitar stood, his massive form casting a shadow across the conference table. Very well. We will prepare a formal proposal for this mutual transparency agreement. Your government will have 72 hours to provide their initial response. And during those 72 hours, Sarah asked. During those 72 hours, Counselor Yathara said, you will remain our guest while we suspend all intelligence operations against Earth. In return, we expect your government to suspend their operations against Alliance members. It wasn't freedom, but it wasn't war either. Sarah had managed to turn a potential interstellar incident into the opening framework for a new diplomatic relationship. Whether that framework would actually lead to lasting peace would depend on decisions made by beings far above her authority level. But she had bought humanity time to make those decisions carefully instead of under the pressure of immediate military threat. "There is one more thing," Admiral Vextar said as the other Alliance representatives began filing out of the conference room. "We would like you to continue your participation in the Combat League." Sarah blinked in surprise. "I'm sorry?" "Your real capabilities," the Admiral explained, "have made you something of a legend among our military analysts. They are curious to see what human combat techniques look like when not constrained by the need for secrecy. Consider it a form of cultural exchange." For the first time in 3 years, Sarah Chen allowed herself to smile with genuine anticipation. "I think that could be arranged." 3 months later, the Combat League would witness the first human fighter to achieve an undefeated record, and Sarah's real fighting techniques would become required study material at military academies across the galaxy. But more importantly, the Mutual Defense and Transparency Accord that grew out of her capture would become the foundation for a new era of cooperation between humanity and the Galactic Alliance. Sometimes the best diplomatic victories came from getting caught.